At critical times in our nation's history, presidents have declared national days of prayer. Presidents have personally prayed. For most, they do desire and are very welcome for their citizens to pray for themselves, their families, and to have wisdom to rightly govern. President George Washington actually prayed daily, and he maintained a prayer journal, and I'm going to read to you in just a minute his prayer for Monday, what he prayed every Monday. I think you're going to be blown away by the belief and the sincerity of our first president, George Washington. But I believe that there's no time exists, like even now, that we as a nation pray and as God's people pray. So, Representative Metcalfe, I want to go to you to get your thoughts here. As I mentioned, you and I served together for about 10 years. You know, I know that the Pennsylvania state capitol is full of Bible verses, prayers, acknowledgement of God and what he has done and is doing. For you personally, just an inside view of how Representative Metcalfe thinks, how important is it to you, for instance, that each session is started in prayer and that members are kind of drawn at that point in time to look to the God of heaven, as Benjamin Franklin said, ought to happen?
Well, I think, in the court's decision, to quote what the court had said regarding the Establishment Clause, they said, only theistic prayer can satisfy the historical purpose of appealing for divine guidance in lawmaking, the basis for the Supreme Court taking as a given that prayer presumes a higher power. And I think for the prayer to be preserved from that historical perspective for the House of Representatives was very important for us, that this current generation and future generations will have the opportunity to recognize that their forefathers, that their fathers and mothers, that they did begin their lawmaking sessions by seeking the guidance of God. Now many of the prayers that are offered, or some of the individuals that they might ask to offer the prayers, might not cause one that's a Christian to actually appreciate what's being done during that time of what's supposed to be prayer where you're seeking God's guidance. But I think from the historical perspective, it's very important. And I know, in fact, I used to have a prayer group that met with me regularly when I was first elected. And over the last 20 years, life ebbs and flows, and people get called to different jobs and different seasons in their life where they might not have that time. So the same group of guys don't get together with me any longer. But for years, we met together in my office to pray for God's direction and guidance in our lives, and specifically for God's guidance and direction in my life as a legislator and my efforts to glorify Him in the Pennsylvania legislature. And you and I and a couple of our colleagues, former Representatives Bermelin and Armstrong and Lay, I remember many times that we gathered in your offices as a new freshman, and you had invited me to join with all of you, and we prayed before session started, before we went to the floor even. So I think for people who are going to be in elected office or appointed office or in offices where they're supposed to be serving their fellow citizens, it's important for those individuals to recognize that service and the law that they're operating under should be subservient to God's law and into God. That we should be seeking His favor and seeking His guidance when we are making policies that affect our fellow citizens. Yeah. And in order for those policies to be correct and to be good, and to move us in the proper direction, and to ultimately have God glorified through that. I think the house prayer, the prayer the prayer time that we have, I think ultimately helps us to continue to point people toward God and toward what they should be doing, even though sometimes the prayers that are offered might not be the prayers that should be offered or offered by people that should be offering them.
Daryl, I wish I could continue on and talking about that. Ladies and gentlemen, what Representative Metcalfe was talking about was a sense of accountability. Those in office, if we understand, as our founders said, that we will give an account to God for what we do, not just the citizens at the time of election, but God ultimately. When that's understood, the laws, the regulations, all those kind of things take a marked change. That's why it's important for the righteous to be in authority.